The silence inside Althorpe House is unlike any other silence in England. It carries weight, a deep historical stillness shaped by 5 centuries of aristocratic secrets and the lingering presence of a ghost who still captures the attention of the entire world. But during the opening months of 2026, that silence was ripped apart by a digital shockwave that originated from the very place where Princess Diana once ran through the halls as a child. This wasn't a palace leak or an anonymous insider quietly feeding information to the tabloids. It was something far more deliberate, colder, and far more devastating. The strike came from Charles Spencer, the ninth Earl Spencer. He didn't merely criticize a media project. He detonated something directly at the heart of the Sussex brand. For years, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have managed to stay above water in the unpredictable world of global celebrity by relying on one incredibly powerful foundation: the memory of Princess Diana. It became their shield, their source of legitimacy, and perhaps their most valuable asset. But as the world moves toward the 30th anniversary of Diana's death in 2027, the man who controls access to her true story has finally decided enough is enough. With just 4 words now sending waves through both London and Hollywood. Is this a joke? Charles Spencer did more than reject a Netflix proposal. He effectively opened a war against what he sees as the shameless exploitation of his sister's sacred legacy. This is the story of how a media empire worth millions, built on the emotional weight of another woman's pain, began to crack under the determination of a brother unwilling to let her memory be used any longer. To understand why this moment matters, you first need to understand the man responsible for delivering the blow. Charles Spencer is not simply another distant royal relative living quietly on the outskirts of the Windsor orbit. He is, in many ways, the guardian priest of Diana's legacy. While the royal institution protects the official image of the Princess of Wales, the titles, ceremonies, public role, and carefully curated version of history, Charles protects something much more personal. He protects the woman herself. He protects the sister who became arguably the most pursued and hunted person of the modern era. He is the man who stood before the entire royal family during his unforgettable 1997 eulogy and vowed publicly that Diana's blood family would ensure her sons were raised with the compassion and humanity she valued, rather than the rigid machinery of royal tradition. Althorpe is more than a grand estate sitting in the English countryside. It is a fortress of memory. Diana was not laid to rest inside a royal crypt or a public cemetery. She rests on a quiet island, surrounded by trees she loved, on land that has belonged to the Spencer family for over 500 years. Charles controls access to that island. He decides who gets close and who has the right to help tell the story of the woman buried there. For decades, he remained a watchful and mostly silent guardian, speaking only when absolutely necessary and always with careful precision. But over the last few years, something appears to have changed. Analysts who closely observe the relationship between the Spencers and the Windsors believe Charles may have finally reached his limit. From the sidelines, he has watched his sister's life and the very real pain she experienced, transformed into marketable content and repackaged for profit by the same people who insist they are preserving her memory. His recent and highly public rejection was more than business. It was an act of family defense. The event that ignited this conflict centered around a project that was supposed to become the grand reset for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. By early 2026, Harry and Meghan were facing a difficult reality. Their partnership with Spotify had ended in a very public and embarrassing collapse, with executives reportedly labeling them grifters. Their lifestyle company, first introduced as American Riviera Orchard before later becoming As Ever, struggled to gain the luxury appeal they had hoped for. By 2026, even Netflix had stepped away as an equity partner in As Ever, leaving Meghan to manage the Artisan Jam and $64 candle venture independently, a much riskier path. Meanwhile, Harry's Polo documentary and Meghan's series With Love, Meghan were being described by insiders as uninspired and forgettable. The cooking series itself reportedly lasted only 2 seasons before cancellation. They needed success, not just a success, something massive, something powerful enough to justify their huge long-term agreement with Netflix, a deal that had reportedly already been reduced into a more limited first-look arrangement. Inside Montecito, the solution seemed obvious: the 30th anniversary of Diana's death in 2027. Netflix executives eager for a major worldwide hit reportedly proposed an ambitious multi-episode project. This was never intended to be a simple historical documentary. It was designed as a larger narrative experience. The purpose was clear: create an unmistakable line between the struggles Diana faced during the 1990s and the challenges Meghan Markle claims to face today. The reported script was designed to present Meghan not simply as another royal family member, but as a modern reflection of Diana herself, a woman battling the same cold institution and facing the same relentless media machine. The strategy relied heavily on nostalgia, present-day conflict, and a carefully crafted victim narrative that has increasingly become part of the Sussex formula. But there was one major weakness hidden within the plan. They assumed Charles Spencer would cooperate. When Netflix reached out to the Earl, they were asking for much more than a simple interview. They wanted the prize everyone knew mattered most: access to Althorp House, access to private family archives, access to the emotional center of Diana's childhood and personal history. Charles Spencer's participation would have given the series something Harry and Meghan could never create on their own: authenticity. It would have sent a message to the world that Diana's own family supported the comparisons being made between these two women. But when Charles Spencer reportedly reviewed the proposal and saw Meghan's name attached not only as a participant, but as a central voice and spiritual guide for the project, he did not see a tribute. He saw something entirely different. He saw absurdity. He saw his sister's memory being used to rescue a struggling media identity, and his reaction was immediate. Inside the portrait-filled halls of Althorp, where generations of Spencers seemed to watch in permanent silence, Charles reportedly made his feelings unmistakably clear. He didn't simply reject the idea. He reportedly made it known that comparing Meghan's modern celebrity experience to Diana's lifelong struggle against the establishment, a struggle that ultimately ended in tragedy, was, in his words, a joke. With 4 words, he dismissed the very foundation on which much of the Sussex American narrative had been built. The gates of Althorp closed, and in that moment, Harry and Meghan were effectively locked out of the one story that continued to keep them deeply connected to a worldwide audience. But this rejection wasn't sudden. It did not appear overnight. It was the result of years of observation from the Spencer family. Royal commentators and critics have even developed a phrase for what they believe they have been witnessing: Diana cosplay. According to critics, this goes far beyond a daughter-in-law respectfully honoring the memory of her husband's late mother. Instead, it has increasingly been described as a long-term and deliberate effort to absorb Diana's image, symbolism, and emotional identity. The similarities, they argue, are simply too frequent to dismiss as coincidence. Consider the jewelry. It began with the aquamarine ring worn during the wedding reception, a gesture many initially viewed as touching and sincere. But over time, it evolved into a steady parade of symbolic pieces: the butterfly earrings, the Cartier tank watch, the gold bracelets. These were never just accessories. They were deeply connected pieces of Diana's personal image and identity. And many appeared during highly visible public appearances where cameras captured every detail. But according to critics, the parallels extended far beyond jewelry. Eventually, they reached the narrative itself. By 2025 and 2026, the comparisons had become increasingly difficult to ignore. A Harper's Bazaar photo shoot in 2025 featured Meghan in poses that many believed closely echoed some of Diana's most iconic portrait sessions. Then came the so-called dress controversy, where Meghan appeared in a Netflix promotional campaign wearing a dress that reignited older discussions surrounding designer clothing and once again fed into the recurring narrative of being pursued and targeted, themes strongly associated with Diana's own experience. For Charles Spencer, watching all of this unfold from Althorp may have felt like staring into a distorted reflection of his sister's suffering, transformed into branding. But perhaps nothing felt more unsettling than the Oprah interview in 2021. For him, it may have appeared like a masterclass in mirroring the structure of Diana's own public narrative. The lighting, the carefully timed pauses, themes of isolation, silence, and mental health struggles. To some observers, it felt like a modern update of Diana's famous 1995 Panorama interview. Meghan was positioning herself as an outsider trapped beneath the weight of the same gray-suited institution Diana once warned the public about. But perhaps the most painful consequence of all of this lands on one person in particular, Prince Harry. Because Harry now appears trapped inside a deeply personal conflict. He stands between loyalty to his wife and loyalty to the family history he once left behind. For Harry, the Spencer family always represented something different. They represented the more human side of his identity, the part untouched by royal machinery and Windsor expectations. Yet by allowing so much of his public image and media work to revolve around his mother's story, he may have slowly pushed away the very people who once stood at Diana's funeral and promised to protect him. Back in 1997, Charles Spencer stood before the world at Westminster Abbey and vowed to protect Diana's sons. He promised they would grow up with compassion, humanity, and emotional depth, not simply be molded by royal obligation and tradition. Now, nearly 3 decades later in 2026, Charles may believe he is honoring that same promise in a very different way. By refusing to allow Diana's memory to become the foundation of a commercial Netflix project, he appears to be sending a message that preserving truth matters more than preserving a brand. This criticism cuts much deeper than any tabloid headline ever could, because it comes from something far more powerful: blood and history. And the fallout from this decision has only widened the divide between the two brothers, William and Harry. For years, reports have suggested that William has been increasingly frustrated by the way their mother's memory has been packaged and commercialized. Now, for perhaps the first time in public view, he and his uncle Charles Spencer appear completely aligned. That leaves Harry in an increasingly lonely position, drifting deeper into a narrative that members of his own family have openly criticized, and in some cases, publicly mocked. And in Hollywood, perception is not just important. Perception is everything. Right now, the perception surrounding the Sussex brand is becoming increasingly dangerous. They are beginning to look like a risky investment. Brand strategists seem to be repeating the same conclusion. The Spencer veto may be a devastating blow to their entire royal content strategy. Because when Princess Diana's own brother publicly frames your project as exploitation, you lose the very thing your brand depended on most: authenticity. Inside Netflix, reports suggest serious concern has begun to grow. The planned Diana project for 2027 was supposed to be their guaranteed success story, their dependable global event. But without Althorp and the cooperation of the Spencer family, much of the project's credibility disappears. What remains becomes another unauthorized, highly dramatized retelling, exactly the kind of content audiences have begun losing interest in, and the consequences may already be appearing. By 2026, reports surfaced claiming Meghan had been turned away from attending the Met Gala, something many interpreted as evidence that parts of Hollywood's elite circle were beginning to distance themselves. Because brand contamination is real. If a public figure becomes associated with exploiting a beloved icon against the wishes of that icon's own family, luxury brands and major celebrities often become cautious. Reputation protection suddenly becomes a priority. The media has already spent years documenting the cooling relationships surrounding friendships with figures like the Clooneys and the Beckhams. And this latest failure to produce a major project gives Netflix a reason to reconsider its remaining investment in the Sussex partnership. Because if Harry and Meghan are no longer delivering the royal drama audiences crave, and lifestyle ventures like As Ever are not generating major numbers, then a difficult question emerges. What exactly is their value to one of the world's largest streaming companies? There is a growing possibility they could become yesterday's headline, fading into the endless noise of social media personalities and influencer culture. The financial consequences of that possibility could be enormous. The Sussex lifestyle requires substantial and continuous income, the type of money only elite media deals can consistently produce. And if those deals begin disappearing because the royal connection itself has weakened, then the empire surrounding the Sussex brand could unravel just as quickly as it was created. But hidden beyond the elegant image of Althorp House is something far more valuable than land or wealth. The Spencer family archives. Because when people discuss the Althorpe veto, they are not simply talking about a documentary crew being denied access to a country estate. They are talking about losing the ultimate prize in royal storytelling. Sources reportedly connected to the planned 2027 Netflix project claimed producers were hoping for access to Diana's personal handwritten journals and unseen home videos never released to the public. That was the treasure. That was the key Harry and Meghan reportedly needed to position the project as the definitive and most intimate account of Diana's life ever produced. But Charles Spencer understands something important. The moment those personal memories are digitized, uploaded, and streamed across the world, a piece of his sister's mystery disappears forever. By saying no, he did more than stop a documentary project. He protected the final fragments of Diana's privacy from becoming visual background material for a streaming service. And strategically, it was a brilliant move. In the world of premium documentary filmmaking, unseen material is everything. Without exclusive footage, a Diana documentary becomes another retelling of a familiar story, another collection of old clips that hardly justifies a multi-million-dollar production. For Meghan, access to those archives could have represented something much larger. It would have served as proof that she had become the chosen voice trusted to tell Diana's story. It would have further cemented the idea of Meghan as Diana's modern-day spiritual successor. But Charles Spencer saw directly through the strategy, because he understands that once those archives become part of a commercial production, the Spencer family permanently loses control over its role as guardian of Diana's authentic legacy. And with one decision, he effectively pulled the foundation away from beneath the Sussex narrative, leaving behind a story that feels increasingly hollow. Although Charles Spencer has become the public face of this resistance, many royal insiders suspect he may not be acting independently. There are growing whispers that a quiet alliance has slowly formed between the Earl and his older nephew, Prince William. For years, public attention remained focused on the fractured relationship between Harry and William. But behind that story, many may have missed another relationship becoming stronger, the growing connection between William and the Spencer family. William, who has long been known for fiercely protecting his mother's image and legacy, has reportedly remained in regular communication with his uncle regarding the planned Netflix project for 2027. This goes beyond a simple family dispute. What we are seeing is a calculated and coordinated defensive strategy. By standing alongside Charles Spencer, William may have found a way to shut down Harry and Meghan's commercial ambitions without Buckingham Palace ever needing to release a single official statement. It is a move that feels both strategic and ruthless at the same time, because if Buckingham Palace stepped in to block a documentary, critics would immediately frame it as censorship. But when Diana's own blood family closes the door, the narrative changes completely. Suddenly, it becomes about family loyalty, protection, and honor. And that leaves Harry trapped in an incredibly difficult position. He cannot publicly attack his uncle without appearing disrespectful toward his mother's family. At the same time, he cannot openly challenge William without reigniting a feud that much of the public already seems exhausted by. The Althorpe veto may represent the first major success of this quiet new alliance. Proof that when the true legacy of the Princess of Wales is involved, Diana's family and the future king appear to be speaking with a single voice. But the effects of this decision are not stopping in London. The ripple effects are now being felt through Montecito and deep inside Los Angeles boardrooms. Because in Hollywood, success can spread rapidly, but failure spreads even faster. For years, Meghan Markle was viewed as a bridge connecting two worlds, the traditional world of royalty and the modern world of celebrity culture. But that bridge relied on one important assumption, that she still possessed the royal keys. Now that the Guardian of Althorpe has openly questioned that authenticity, influential figures in Hollywood may be beginning to look at the Sussex brand through a much more cautious lens. Inside elite circles, one concern outweighs all others: brand contamination. If Meghan becomes associated with exploiting an iconic and deeply loved figure like Diana, particularly while Diana's own brother publicly criticizes the effort, she suddenly becomes a much riskier partner for global brands. We have already seen signs of slowing momentum. Luxury fashion houses appear less interested. Her lifestyle company, as ever, has struggled to gain major traction. Products like the $64 candles and signature calligraphy bookmarks have faced heavy criticism online, with some critics describing them as carrying an air of desperation. Now, the Spencer veto becomes something even larger, a warning shot, a signal to future business partners, because the message becomes clear. Align yourself too closely with this narrative and you may eventually find yourself standing on the wrong side of history. And in the unforgiving world of celebrity branding, once authenticity begins to disappear, invitations can vanish just as quickly. Harry and Meghan are not only losing a Netflix project, they may be losing their place at the highest levels of the very celebrity world they came to America hoping to dominate. To fully understand why Charles Spencer reacted with such force to comparisons between Meghan and Diana, we have to return to where the original damage began. The 1995 Panorama interview. Over the years, information surrounding that explosive interview revealed that Diana had effectively been manipulated into participating through fake documents and psychological pressure. And Charles Spencer has carried a heavy burden over his role ever since. Because he was the person who first introduced Diana to the journalist involved. For decades, that decision has remained a source of guilt. He witnessed firsthand how his sister's vulnerability became material for ratings, headlines, and public consumption. And now, many years later, he may believe he is seeing echoes of that same pattern once again. Another large media machine, another attempt to package suffering, another effort to transform pain into audience engagement and profit. To Charles, comparisons between Meghan's 2021 Oprah interview and Diana's 1995 Panorama appearance are not respectful tributes. He sees repetition. He sees familiar patterns. He sees the same language of victimhood surrounding a story connected to his sister's memory. And by refusing to support the 2027 project, he appears to be making a larger statement. He is attempting to stop the cycle. He is refusing to allow Diana's very real suffering to become a blueprint for modern celebrity branding. In his eyes, this may be a stand for something larger, the difference between Diana's authentic experience and a polished narrative packaged for audiences thousands of miles away. Thank you for watching this deep dive investigation from the Royal Daily Report. This story is still unfolding, and the full consequences of Charles Spencer's decision may only now be starting to emerge across the world. What do you think about this quiet partnership between William and Charles? Has the Diana narrative officially reached its limit? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and stay with the Royal Daily Report as we continue following the latest developments surrounding the final chapters of the Sussex royal story. Until next time, goodbye.